Adrian did not move for 3 full seconds, and in that silence, Alina felt every inch of the room turn toward her. The private dining suite seemed larger now, colder, its polished walls reflecting faces that had suddenly forgotten how to look casual. Charles Whitmore leaned back with a slow, amused breath, as if he had just witnessed a child interrupt a board meeting. Evan Mercer's smile stayed in place, but the skin around his eyes tightened. Patricia Hale stood near the door with one hand pressed to her headset, her expression begging Alina to stop before she destroyed more than her shift. But Alina could not stop, not after seeing those 4 words, not after hearing that smooth attorney call it standard. Standard was the word people used when they wanted you to stop reading. Standard was the word that had once turned her whole life into a locked room with no handle. Before Halstead and Crown, before the black vest and the name tag and the careful smile, Alina Brooks had lived in a different world. She had been a law student at Northwestern, the kind professors remembered because she asked the question everyone else was too nervous to ask. She worked nights at a diner on the South Side, studied on buses with her notes folded across her knees, and believed that if she just kept going, dignity would eventually outrun exhaustion. Her mother cleaned offices for 28 years and used to say that a sharp mind was the one thing no landlord, boss, or judge could take from you. Alina believed her. She believed it until the internship at Pierce and Gold showed her how polite rooms could ruin people without raising their voices. Judge Malcolm Pierce had not looked like danger. He wore silver glasses, gave speeches about opportunity, and told young people from poor neighborhoods that the legal system needed their courage. Alina had admired him. Then one afternoon, she noticed irregular language in a settlement agreement, a quiet transfer clause that shifted liability onto families who could not afford to fight back. She asked the wrong question in the wrong meeting. 2 weeks later, her signature appeared on a document she had never approved. The firm called it misconduct. The school called it a violation of trust. The newspapers called it unfortunate. No one called it what it was. Alina lost her scholarship, her internship, her apartment, and nearly every person who had once introduced her with pride. The world did not collapse all at once. It arrived in envelopes, phone calls, unpaid bills, and polite rejections. So she learned another kind of law, the law of survival. She learned to keep her eyes down. She learned that people with money did not always need to tell the truth if they could afford a better story. She learned to carry plates past men discussing contracts. She could still read better than half the attorneys who drafted them. That was why, when emergency operational transfer appeared on Adrian Kang's final page, something old and buried opened inside her chest. It was not ambition. It was recognition. Adrian watched her as if he could hear every piece of that history without her saying it. "Explain," he said. Evan Mercer gave a soft laugh. "Mr. Kong, surely we are not pausing an 8-figure acquisition because a waitress misunderstood commercial language." Alina's face warmed, but her voice stayed low. "I did not misunderstand it." Charles Whitmore tapped one finger on the table. "This is embarrassing for the restaurant." Patricia stepped forward. "Mr. Kong, I am so sorry. Alina will be removed immediately." Adrian did not look away from Alina. "No," he said. "One word, clean and final." Patricia stopped again. Evan Mercer's smile faded a little more. Adrian turned the contract toward Alina and slid it across the table until the final page rested beneath her hand. The movement was quiet, but everyone understood what it meant. He had given the waitress the floor. Alina stared down at the paper, aware of the crystal glasses, the silk ties, the security guards, the impossible distance between who she had been and who they thought she was. Then she touched the clause with one finger. "This says if there is any emergency disruption affecting operations, temporary control transfers to Whitmore Logistics until stability is restored." But emergency disruption is not defined. Stability is not defined.
Temporary is.
Not defined. That means the person who creates the disruption can also decide when it ends. The silence changed shape. Adrian's eyes lowered to the words. Charles Whitmore stopped tapping the table. Evan Mercer reached for the page, but Adrian's hand came down on it first, calm and still. "Keep going," Adrian said. Alina breathed in. For the first time in years, Someone powerful was not telling her to be quiet. He was telling her to continue. And the room went silent. Alina kept her finger on the clause because if she lifted it, she feared the room would pretend the truth had never been there. Evan Mercer adjusted his cufflinks, the first nervous gesture he had allowed himself, and Charles Whitmore gave him a quick sideways glance that vanished almost as soon as it appeared. Adrian saw it. Alina saw him see it. That was when she understood that Adrian Kong had not survived rooms like this by trusting smiles. He leaned back just enough to give her space, but not enough to release the room from his control. "Read the next paragraph," he said. His voice was quiet, but it settled over every person at the table like a locked door. Alina lowered her eyes to the contract again. The words blurred for a second, not because she could not understand them, but because her body remembered what happened the last time she told powerful people they were wrong. Her old dean's office. The framed degrees. The apology that sounded like a sentence. The way Judge Malcolm Pierce had looked at her through silver glasses and said, "Miss Brooks, sometimes ambition makes young people careless." She had been 24 years old, standing in a navy suit she bought on clearance, trying to explain that the signature was not hers. No one had listened. Tonight, in a room that smelled of money and winter rain against glass, a man everyone feared was listening. She took one slow breath. The next paragraph says Whitmore Logistics may appoint a transition administrator in the event of operational uncertainty. Evan Mercer interrupted with a small laugh, which is normal in acquisitions of this size. Alina looked at him then, and the softness left her face. Normal language would say both. Parties approve the administrator in writing. This says Whitmore may appoint one. Not both parties. Not neutral review. Just Whitmore. Adrian's gaze shifted to Mercer. Mercer's smile grew thinner. "It is a temporary safeguard." "No," Alina said, the word leaving her before fear could stop it. Patricia's eyes widened near the door. One of the Korean guards turned his head slightly. Charles Whitmore's amusement disappeared. Alina heard her own heartbeat, but she did not take the word back. A safeguard protects both sides. This protects one side from consequences and gives that same side control over the other. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of calculation. Adrian tapped one finger against the table, once, not impatiently, but as if marking a point in his mind. "And if I signed it?" he asked. Alina looked down at the paper again, and the answer came with sickening clarity. "Then tomorrow morning, if there is any delay at the port, any missing permit, any labor dispute, any customs review, anything they can label uncertainty, Whitmore Logistics can step in. They can freeze your operational authority. They can review your accounts. They can control shipments under the language of stabilization. And because you agreed to it in advance, your own lawyers would spend months trying to unwind what your signature allowed in 5 seconds." Adrian did not blink. Charles Whitmore placed both palms flat on the table. "This is absurd. She is making guesses." "She is reading," Adrian said. 2 words. Clean. Cold. The room absorbed them. For the first time that night, Alina saw Whitmore's confidence crack through the polished surface. It was small, just a tightness in the jaw, but it was there. Evan Mercer reached for the contract again. "Mr. Kong, I strongly recommend we continue this discussion without service staff present." Adrian's hand covered the page before Mercer could touch it. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "You recommended I sign it." Mercer froze. The sound of silverware from the main dining room drifted faintly beyond the glass. Another world still eating dinner, laughing, living as if this private room had not just become the edge of a cliff. Alina felt Patricia staring at her with a mixture of anger and terrified wonder. She knew what Patricia was thinking. A waitress was never supposed to become the center of a room like this. A waitress was supposed to apologize, disappear into the kitchen, and be grateful if management let her finish the week. But Adrian turned the page toward Alina again. "What else?" he asked. Alina's throat tightened. Those 2 words were more dangerous than any insult. They meant he believed there was more. They meant he believed her enough to keep listening. She scanned the next section, and the cold spread deeper through her chest. There it was again, another hidden hinge in the contract, phrased so elegantly it almost looked harmless. Section 12, she said. Dispute resolution. Evan Mercer's face changed before anyone else moved. That was enough. Adrian noticed. Alina's voice dropped, but every person heard it. This one is worse. Charles Whitmore pushed back his chair slightly. Mr. Kong, this has gone far enough. Adrian did not look at him. Sit still. Whitmore stopped moving. Not because Adrian threatened him. Because the room itself seemed to obey. Alina pointed to the paragraph. If you challenge the transfer, you cannot go to court. You are forced into private arbitration. But the arbitration panel must be selected from a list maintained by the transition administrator. And the transition administrator would be chosen by Whitmore. Adrian's eyes darkened. Alina let the meaning hang there for one beat, then said it plainly. They choose the problem. They choose the person who takes control. Then they choose the people who decide whether you get control back. No one laughed now. No one even pretended to. The contract lay between them like something exposed to daylight for the first time. Adrian slowly turned his eyes to Charles Whitmore, and whatever friendship, partnership, or courtesy had been sitting at that table began to die without a sound. Alina stepped back half an inch, suddenly aware of how much she had said and how impossible it would be to become invisible again. But Adrian's next words stopped her. Miss Brooks, he said, speaking her name as if it belonged in the room. Do not step away from that table. Alina stayed beside the table, but every instinct in her body told her to run. The private room had changed around her. The candlelight still glowed against the brass fixtures, the wine still rested in crystal glasses, and the city still glittered beyond the glass, but the warmth had drained out of everything. Charles Whitmore was no longer smiling. Evan Mercer no longer looked like a man guiding a clean business deal. Patricia Hale stood near the door with her lips pressed together, torn between protecting the restaurant and understanding that something far larger than a ruined dinner was unfolding. Adrian Kong did not speak for a moment. He only studied the contract, his eyes moving over the clauses Alina had exposed, one after another, like hidden cracks spreading beneath polished marble. Then he turned to Evan Mercer. Who drafted this? Mercer adjusted his tie. Our legal team prepared the final version in coordination with both sides. That is not what I ask. Adrian's voice did not rise, but the attorney seemed to shrink beneath it. Who drafted this exact language? Mercer hesitated for half a second too long. Alina saw it. Adrian saw it. Even Whitmore saw it, because his hand closed around his water glass without lifting it. A consultant reviewed the transition provisions, Mercer said carefully. These transactions require specialized language. Adrian leaned back, calm as winter. Name. The word landed on the table with the weight of a verdict. Mercer looked at Whitmore, and in that one desperate glance, the room received its answer before he spoke. Pierce Advisory Group, Mercer said. Alina stopped breathing. The name reached across the years and touched the deepest bruise she had. Pierce. Her fingers curled against her palm. For a moment, the private dining room disappeared, replaced by Judge Malcolm Pierce's office, the silver-framed diplomas, the smell of coffee and leather, the careful pity in his voice as he explained how unfortunate it was that her promise had been wasted. Pierce Advisory Group. Of course. Men like him did not vanish when they destroyed someone. They rebranded. They consulted. They sat behind new letterheads and cleaner titles, still teaching powerful people how to bury others under beautiful language. Adrian turned his head slightly, watching her reaction with frightening precision. You know that name. It was not a question. Alina looked at the contract, not him. I know the man behind it. Charles Whitmore exhaled sharply. This is becoming ridiculous. A waitress has a personal grudge, and suddenly we are treating that as legal analysis. Alina's eyes lifted to him. The fear was still there, but something steadier had risen beneath it. I have no grudge against words on paper, Mr. Whitmore. I only know what they do when people pretend not to understand them. Whitmore's face tightened. Adrian's expression did not change, but one of his men glanced down as if hiding the smallest flicker of approval. Mercer tried to regain control. Mr. Kong, even if Miss Brooks has some history with a consulting firm, That does not make her qualified to derail a transaction of this magnitude. She did not derail it, Adrian said. She read it. Again, the words cut cleanly. Alina felt them in her chest, not as comfort, but as recognition. For years, everyone had treated her intelligence like an inconvenience. Adrian was treating it like evidence. He turned the contract over, closed it, and placed the pen on top of the unsigned page. The sound was soft, almost nothing, but the whole room seemed to hear the decision inside it. We are not signing tonight. Whitmore sat forward. Adrian, that would be a mistake. No, Adrian said. Signing would have been the mistake. The air tightened. Whitmore's charm returned in pieces, forced and thin. Let us not allow a misunderstanding to damage years of good faith. Adrian looked at him then, and the temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Good faith does not hide control clauses under emergency language. Mercer opened his mouth, then closed it when Adrian raised his eyes. Alina noticed Patricia standing a little straighter now, her anger replaced by something like shame. Perhaps she was remembering every time she had told Alina to smile more, speak less, keep moving, never make guests uncomfortable. Perhaps she was realizing that the woman she almost dragged out of the room had just saved the most important man in it from signing away his power. Adrian picked up the contract and held it out to Alina. Show me every clause tied to Pierce Advisory Group. The request stunned her more than any insult could have. Mr. Kong, I am not your lawyer. No, he said quietly. But tonight, you are the only person in this room who has earned my trust. The words settled over the table. Whitmore looked away. Mercer went pale. Patricia lowered her eyes. Alina accepted the contract with both hands, feeling the expensive paper against her fingertips, feeling the old life and the new one collide in the space between them. She turned the page slowly. Her voice was still soft when she began again, but it no longer trembled. Then we should start with Section 14. Adrian nodded once. The room waited. And for the first time in years, Alina Brooks did not feel invisible. Section 14 looked harmless at first. That was what made it dangerous. Alina had learned long ago that the ugliest traps were rarely written in ugly language. They came dressed in courtesy, procedure, and phrases that made reasonable people nod along because objecting would make them look difficult. She turned the page under the amber light and read slowly, letting each line settle before she spoke. Post-transfer compliance review, she said. At first glance, it sounds like routine auditing. But the review is triggered automatically after signature, not after transfer. That means the moment you sign, before midnight, before any operational issue, Whitmore Logistics has the right to request internal records. Adrian's eyes sharpened. What kind of records? Alina traced the paragraph with her finger. Financial ledgers, vendor agreements, payroll documents, port access schedules, security protocols, and any materials deemed reasonably necessary for transition oversight. The last phrase made her pause. She had seen it before, wearing another suit, inside another lie. Reasonably necessary is doing too much work here. It gives them room to ask for almost anything, then accuse you of non-cooperation if you refuse. Evan Mercer leaned forward. That is a wildly aggressive interpretation. Alina looked at him without blinking. Then why is there a penalty clause 3 lines later? Mercer's mouth closed. Adrian took the contract from her just long enough to read where she pointed. The room held its breath as his jaw tightened, barely, but enough. Failure to provide requested materials within 48 hours constitutes administrative obstruction, he read. His voice was calm, but every word seemed to scrape the polish off the table. Alina nodded. And administrative obstruction allows Whitmore to accelerate the emergency transfer. Charles Whitmore laughed again, but this time it had no shape. This is business protection. Every acquisition has pressure points. Pressure points are negotiated, Alina said softly. This is a staircase. Every step leads to the same door. No one answered. Beyond the glass wall, a server passed with a tray of desserts for another table, and for one strange second, Alina saw the life she was supposed to be living, quiet, obedient, unseen. Then the door opened, and Patricia Hale slipped in, her face pale from whatever instructions she had received through her headset. "Mr. Kong," she said carefully, "the main dining room is beginning to notice the delay. I can move your party to our executive lounge if you would prefer privacy." Adrian did not look away from a contract.
No, Patricia swallowed.
"Of course." She turned to Alina then, and her voice dropped, not cruel this time, only frightened. "Alina, maybe you should let the gentleman handle this now." For a moment, the old training rose inside her. Apologize. Step back. Make yourself small enough to survive. But the contract was still open, and the name Pierce Advisory Group still burned in her mind. She looked at Patricia, the woman who had corrected her posture, her smile, her pace, her tone, as if dignity were a uniform violation. "I tried letting gentlemen handle it before," Alina said. "That is how I ended up here." Patricia's face changed. Not offense. Recognition. Adrian heard it too. His gaze lifted, quieter now, less like a ruler of a room and more like a man seeing a person standing where a shadow used to be. "Before," he said. Alina wished he had not heard that word. She wished she could gather it back and tuck it away with all the things she had trained herself not to mention. But Charles Whitmore seized on it, delighted to find weakness. There it is. Personal history. Bias. "Mr. Kong, are you really risking a strategic acquisition because your waitress has unresolved feelings about a consultant?" The word waitress landed with deliberate weight. Alina felt it strike, but it no longer knocked the air from her. Adrian's hand rested on the closed pen. "Say her name." Whitmore blinked. "Excuse me?" "Her name," Adrian repeated. "Use it." The room went very still. Whitmore's eyes flicked toward Alina, then back to Adrian. His smile was gone now. "Miss Brooks." "Better," Adrian said. It was not kindness. It was correction. And somehow that made it more powerful. Alina looked down before anyone could see what the moment did to her. She had not expected defense. She had expected dismissal. Adrian turned to her. "Tell me about Pierce." Alina's fingers tightened around the edge of the contract. Her past had lived for years behind a locked door, and tonight that door was opening in front of men who measured weakness like currency. Still, she had come too far to retreat. Judge Malcolm Pierce ran a fellowship program for law students from low-income neighborhoods, she said. "I was one of them." He said he believed in second chances, in talent without privilege. I believed him. Her voice remained steady, but only because she forced it to. Then I found a clause like this one in a settlement agreement. It shifted responsibility away from a developer and onto families who could not afford a long legal fight. I raised concerns. A week later, documents appeared with my signature on approvals I never gave. My school opened an ethics investigation. Pierce called it like Pierce. It thinks like him. Adrian sat back slowly, his expression unreadable, but something in the room had tilted. The waitress had become a witness. The contract had become a confession. And Charles Whitmore, for the first time all evening, looked like a man who wished the pen had moved faster. Adrian did not ask another question right away. He let Alina's words remain in the air, where everyone had to breathe them in. Judge Malcolm Pierce. Forged approval. Ethics investigation. A life folded shut by people who called injustice procedure. The private room seemed to hold its own breath, the city lights behind the glass blinking like distant witnesses. Charles Whitmore looked toward Evan Mercer, but Mercer had gone very still, his face careful in the way guilty men become careful when a forgotten name returns to the table. Adrian noticed that too. He noticed everything. You have heard this story before, pages in front of her, and each one seemed to carry another hidden wire. Adrian slid his phone from inside his jacket and placed it on the table. "Call Mincio." One of his men near the wall stepped forward and dialed, without a word, Alina's voice. Adrian turned back to her. Section 14 gave access to records. Section 12 trapped me in arbitration. What connects them? Alina looked down. The answer was there, but it took a moment for the full shape to form. Then she saw it, a cross-reference buried in a footnote, small enough to be mistaken for housekeeping language. Her pulse kicked once. "Section 21, she whispered. Mercer's face lost color. Alina turned the pages faster now, not with panic, but with purpose. There is a data integrity warranty tied to the compliance review. If any submitted record is incomplete, outdated, disputed, or inconsistent with third-party reporting, it counts as a material breach. Adrian leaned forward. Meaning? Alina looked at Whitmore. Meaning they only need one discrepancy. One vendor file. One payroll timestamp. One outdated permit copy. Then they can claim you breached the warranty, trigger emergency control, force arbitration through their chosen panel, and access more records to find more discrepancies. It feeds itself. Min Seo's voice came through the speaker, quieter now. That is not a contract. That is a cage. The words struck the table harder than any raised voice could have. Adrian closed the contract with one hand. Charles Whitmore finally looked away. Evan Mercer stared at the table as if the grain of the wood had become fascinating. Alina stood beside Adrian's chair, still in her waitress uniform, still wearing the name tag they had used to underestimate her, but the room no longer saw a woman carrying plates. It saw a mind that had walked through fire and still knew how to read the smoke. Adrian spoke without looking away from Whitmore. Min Seo, preserve this call. Send a review team here tonight. And find everything you can on Pierce Advisory Group.
Already starting, she said.
Adrian ended the call. Then, in front of everyone, he pushed the untouched pen away from the contract until it rolled to the edge of the table and stopped. This agreement is dead, he said. The room went silent. By the time Min Seo's review team arrived at Halstead and Crown, the private dining room no longer felt like a restaurant. It felt like a courtroom without a judge, a place where polished lies had been placed under bright light and found trembling. Two attorneys in navy suits entered quietly with laptops and sealed folders, followed by a compliance specialist carrying a slim scanner. No one spoke loudly.
No one needed to.
The contract sat in the center of the table, and signed, marked with Alina's careful notes on a stack of white napkins, because no one had thought to give the waitress a legal pad until it was far too late to keep pretending she was just pouring wine. Adrian Kong stood near the window, his reflection faint against the black glass, Chicago glittering behind him in cold silver lines. Charles Whitmore had stopped performing charm. He sat with one hand over his mouth, eyes fixed on the table, as if silence might rebuild the deal he had watched collapse. Evan Mercer looked smaller now, his perfect suit unable to hide the fact that every explanation he had offered had made the truth easier to see. Patricia Hale remained near the door, but she was not guarding it anymore. She was watching Alina with the quiet shame of someone realizing she had been trained to protect the wrong people. Min Seo herself appeared on the large screen built into the wall, her face composed, her voice clear. We have confirmed 3 matching clause structures in prior Pierce Advisory Group transactions, she said. Same emergency transfer language. Same restricted arbitration pathway. Same data integrity trigger. Different company names, same architecture. Adrian turned from the window. And the outcomes? Each target lost operational control within 30 days of signing. Each dispute settled confidentially. None regained full control without major concessions. The words fell one by one, clean and heavy. Whitmore looked up sharply. Settlements are not admissions. Alina answered before Adrian could.
No.
But patterns are not accidents. The room went still again, and this time no one corrected her for speaking. Min Seo's eyes moved on the screen toward Alina. Miss Brooks is right. Those 4 words did something to the air. Alina felt them pass through her like warmth after years of standing outside in the cold. Not because they fixed anything. They did not restore her scholarship. They did not erase the years of being doubted, underpaid, and dismissed. But they placed a stone back into the foundation of her name. One truth, spoken clearly, in front of people who could not pretend not to hear it. Adrian walked back to the table and pulled out the chair beside him. Sit down, Miss Brooks. Alina froze. Servers did not sit in private dining rooms during VIP service. Servers did not sit beside men like Adrian Kong while attorneys waited for their input. Patricia took one small step forward, then stopped herself. Alina looked at the chair as if it belonged to someone else. Mr. Kong, I am still on shift.
Not anymore, he said.
Tonight, you are here because you understand what everyone else missed. She sat slowly, her back straight, hands folded together to hide their trembling. The chair felt too soft, the table too wide, the attention too bright. But Adrian did not make a show of it. He simply placed the contract in front of her and turned to Mincio. Ask her what you need. For the next 20 minutes, Alina walked them through the structure again, section by section, her voice growing steadier with each answer. She explained how the clauses fed one another, how the undefined terms created false emergencies, how the arbitration panel closed the exit door, and how the compliance review created the excuse to take more control. The review team typed quickly. Mincio listened without interruption. Adrian watched the others. Whitmore's anger faded into calculation, then into something closer to defeat. Mercer tried twice to object, and both times Mincio asked him to point to language that contradicted Alina's reading. Both times he failed. At last, Adrian closed the folder and slid it away from himself. Mr. Whitmore, he said, you came here tonight expecting my signature. Instead, you will leave with questions from my legal team, my auditors, and anyone else entitled to know why this document looks like 3 failed acquisitions wearing a new suit. Whitmore's face hardened. You are making a serious mistake. Adrian's expression remained calm.
No. 4.
Once I avoided one. Then he turned to Patricia. Miss Brooks will not be punished for tonight. No reduced hours. No disciplinary note. No quiet retaliation after I leave. Patricia's eyes lowered. Of course, Mr. Kong. Adrian's voice cooled by a single degree. That was not a suggestion. Patricia nodded, visibly shaken. Understood. Alina looked down at her name tag, the small plastic rectangle that had felt like a boundary all evening. Alina Brooks, waitress. Invisible when convenient, useful when needed, disposable when uncomfortable. But when Adrian spoke again, he changed the weight of the name. Miss Brooks, he said, tomorrow morning, my office will send you an offer. Independent consultant. Contract review support. Fair compensation.
No favors.
You earned it. The room went silent, not with fear this time, but with the shock of dignity being restored in real time. Alina looked at Adrian, searching for pity and finding none. Only respect. Her voice was quiet when she answered. I will read it before I sign. For the first time that night, Adrian Kong almost smiled. I would expect nothing less. The offer arrived at 9:02 the next morning, but Alina did not open it right away. She sat at the small kitchen table in her apartment on the south side, still wearing yesterday's exhaustion in her shoulders, watching pale winter light crawl across the chipped laminate surface. Her shoes were by the door, her waitress uniform folded over the back of a chair, and the black vest looked strangely powerless in daylight. For 6 months, that uniform had told the world where to place her. Last night, for one impossible hour, it had failed. Her phone buzzed again. 1 email from Kong Holdings. 1 attachment. 1 contract. Alina laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because life had a cruel sense of symmetry. The last time a document changed her future, no one had asked her to read it. This time, a man with enough power to silence a room had told her he expected nothing less. She made coffee, opened the blinds, sat down, and read every word. The agreement was clean. Independent consultant. Limited scope. Full right to reject assignments. Payment that made her sit back and blink twice. A confidentiality clause that protected both sides equally. No hidden transfer language.
No arbitrage trap.
No phrase pretending to be harmless while reaching for her throat. At the bottom was a short note written above Adrian Kang's signature line. Miss Brooks, have your own attorney review this. If you do not have one, my office will pay for one of your choosing, not ours. Alina stared at that sentence for a long time, not because it was generous, because it was respectful. There was a difference, and she had spent years learning how rarely people understood it. By noon, Halstead and Crown had already begun whispering. Patricia Hale called twice, then sent a message apologizing for the previous night and asking if Alina would come in to discuss her schedule. Alina did not answer immediately. She remembered Patricia's hand near her headset, ready to remove her before truth became inconvenient. She also remembered the way Patricia lowered her eyes when Adrian forbade retaliation. Shame did not erase harm, but it could be the first honest thing after it. At 1:15 in the afternoon, a news alert appeared on Alina's phone. Pierce Advisory Group faces renewed scrutiny after multiple private acquisition disputes draw attention. No names. No details from the private room. Nothing that broke confidentiality. But the door had opened. Somewhere, Judge Malcolm Pierce was reading the same headline and realizing that the past he buried had learned how to breathe. Alina set the phone down and closed her eyes. She expected triumph to feel louder. Instead, it felt quiet, like standing after years of kneeling, like hearing her own name without shame attached to it. That evening, she returned to Halstead and Crown, not for a shift, but to collect the extra pair of shoes she kept in the staff locker. The restaurant looked the same, all gold light and polished glass, filled with people who laughed over plates they barely touched. But staff members looked at her differently now. Some with curiosity, some with discomfort. One young busboy gave her a small nod, the kind people give when they do not know the whole story, but know enough to respect the silence. Around it, Patricia met her near the service hallway. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Patricia said, "I was wrong. Not polished. Not corporate. Just human." Alina held her gaze. "Yes," she said. Patricia swallowed. "I am sorry." Alina nodded once. Forgiveness was not a performance, and she would not hand it out just to make someone else comfortable. But she accepted the apology for what it was, a beginning too late, but still a beginning. When she stepped out onto the sidewalk, Chicago's cold air hit her face, sharp and clean. A black sedan waited at the curb, but no one stepped out to rush her. The rear window lowered only halfway. Adrian Kong sat inside, not surrounded by ceremony, not wearing the untouchable stillness of the private room, just watching the city with the tired focus of a man who had spent the day cleaning poison out of his empire. "Miss Brooks," he said. "Mr. Kong." He held up a folder. Mincio found 2 more companies tied to Pierce. "Your reading was correct." Alina breathed out slowly. "It was never just me." Adrian's expression softened by the smallest degree.
No.
"It was never just you." Those words reached places no apology had touched. For years, people had treated her ruin as a private failure, a stain she had somehow earned. Now the truth had shape, names, patterns, witnesses. Adrian placed the folder on the seat beside him. "When you are ready, we could use your help." Alina looked through the open window at him, at the man who had frozen because a waitress whispered, then listened because she knew what she was saying. "I will help," she said. "But I set my terms." This time, Adrian did smile. Not much. Just enough to let the night loosen around them. Good. Alina turned toward the train station instead of the car. She wanted to walk. She wanted to feel the pavement beneath her own feet, the city around her, the cold air in her lungs. Behind her, the sedan remained at the curb for a moment, then pulled away without pressure. For the first time in years, no one owned the next step but her. And that night, long after the restaurant lights dimmed and the unsigned contract sat locked inside Adrian Kang's legal office, Alina Brooks walked home with her head raised, carrying no tray, asking no permission, wearing her dignity like something no one would ever take from her again.